They said it behind my back like it was a joke. He's just not management material. Years later, I walked into their boardroom, not as an employee, but as the man who controls their investors. I still remember the smell of burnt coffee that afternoon. It was the kind of stale, overused scent that clung to corporate air like regret. I was standing just outside the conference room, pretending to check emails on my phone, though I wasn't expecting anything. That day wasn't supposed to be special, but I knew a round of promotions was being decided inside. I'd done everything they asked of me, stayed late, took on extra work, smiled when I wanted to scream. I wasn't flashy, but I got results. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the time I finally got to sit at that table. But when the door cracked open, I caught a sentence that would stick in my mind for years. He's not really management material. There was laughter, light dismissive, like I was some harmless background noise. They didn't even know I heard them, or maybe they didn't care. I stood there frozen. My heart sank slowly like it was trying not to make a sound. I don't know how long I stood outside that room, staring at the door, pretending like none of it mattered. I walked back to my desk, nodded at a few coworkers, even answered a couple emails. But inside, something cracked. It wasn't just the rejection, it was the way they said it. Like it had already been decided long ago, like I was never even in the running. I went home that night and lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what made me so invisible. Was I too quiet? Too safe? Not confident enough? I replayed every meeting, every conversation, trying to find the moment I got left behind. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, but I changed. Something in me hardened, not with hate, but with hunger. They closed that door in my face without a second thought. I promised myself, one day they'd see what they missed. For the next few weeks, I moved through the office like a shadow wearing a smile. No one noticed the difference. I still showed up on time, still wore the same pressed shirts, still said good morning like nothing inside me had changed. But I felt it every single day, that weight, that quiet ache in my chest. It wasn't just disappointment, it was something deeper, like I had been uninvited from a future I thought I was building. Every glance from a coworker felt heavier. Every team meeting felt colder. I wondered if they all knew, if they all agreed. Maybe I'd been the only one who believed I had a shot. That thought stung the most. At home, it was worse. The silence there didn't pretend. My apartment was small and the quiet was loud. I'd sit on the edge of my bed at night and ask myself if I was just fooling myself. Maybe I wasn't cut out to lead. Maybe I really didn't have it. Whatever it was. I started scrolling job boards late into the night, my thumb moving but my heart numb. Every listing blurred into the next. I wasn't looking for a better opportunity. I was looking for an escape. Friends noticed I was quieter. A couple asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was tired. My parents told me to hang in there, that these things happen. My dad even offered to talk to a friend of his at a different company. I nodded, grateful, but I didn't take him up on it. I didn't want to be handed something. I wanted to become something. But I didn't know what, not yet. It was in those weeks that I started to break, not all at once, but slowly. A kind of erosion. I wasn't angry at the people who laughed in that room. I was angry at myself for needing their approval, for waiting around, quietly hoping to be picked. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, and I didn't see someone broken. I saw someone waiting to be built again. And this time, I would build myself from the ground up. The day I handed in my resignation, nobody noticed. Not really. I printed the letter on company stationery, folded it carefully, and slipped it onto my manager's desk before I even sat down that morning. He glanced at it, then nodded without a word. No questions, no offers to talk me out of it. Just silence. That silence hit harder than the rejection. I packed up my things slowly. My desk looked smaller without the usual clutter of deadlines and half-drunk coffee cups. I clicked off my computer for the last time, sliding my ID card into the security gate as if I was leaving behind a ghost. Walking out of that building felt like stepping into a new world. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. The elevator ride down was quieter than I expected. The lobby felt emptier. I wondered if anyone even remembered I worked there. It was a strange mix of freedom and loneliness. On the outside, I told myself it was a choice I made for myself, a step toward something better. But inside, there was a knot of fear I couldn't untangle. What if I had made a mistake? What if walking away wasn't courage but giving up? I didn't have answers, just a restless determination. I spent the next few days wandering the city, trying to breathe in possibilities and breathe out doubts. The world didn't stop turning just because I left a job. People went on with their lives. Buildings towered above me, indifferent. And maybe that was okay. I had been invisible to them before, but now I was invisible by choice. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a safety net. All I had was a quiet fire inside me, burning steady and low. They told me I wasn't management material, but I was about to manage something far bigger than their opinions. I just didn't know it yet. Starting over was nothing like I imagined. There was no grand plan, no overnight success story, just me, a small savings account, and a head full of doubts. I took odd jobs, freelance projects, temp work, anything that paid enough to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. Some days I felt like I was barely holding on. But in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, I was learning. I buried myself in books about business, investing, management, anything that would teach me what I hadn't been given before. I watched videos, listened to podcasts, even joined online forums where people talked about money and leadership like it was a secret language. I was clumsy at first. I made mistakes. I lost money I couldn't afford to lose. I stumbled through concepts that felt overwhelming, but I didn't stop. Each mistake was a lesson carved into my hands, and slowly those hands started to build. It wasn't easy watching old coworkers post promotions and pay raises on social media. Some days I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all, but the fire inside me didn't flare with anger anymore. It was steady, calm, but relentless. I learned to be patient. I had nights where I thought about quitting, about going back and begging for a second chance. But I remembered the door that slammed shut on me, the laughter I overheard. That wasn't a door I wanted to walk through again. Instead, I started small. I saved every penny I could. I took on tiny clients who trusted me with their money, people who believed in me before I believed in myself. And with every portfolio I managed, every client I helped, I grew a little stronger, not just in skill, but in spirit. I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was rebuilding myself. One broken hand at a time. Out of nowhere, he showed up, an older man with cautious eyes and a thick folder of papers. I'd met him through a friend, someone who believed in giving second chances, and that's exactly what he offered me. Not a job, not a title, but a chance. One client, one portfolio. It wasn't much, just a small sum to manage, a few $1,000s at best. But to me, it felt like a lifeline. I remember the night I stayed up late, poring over spreadsheets and market trends. I didn't want to just manage his money. I wanted to prove that I deserved the trust he'd placed in me. I studied, strategized, and planned every move with care. The days that followed were tense. The market fluctuated, and so did my confidence. I could feel the weight of that man's faith pressing down on me. What if I lost it all? What if I failed? But slowly the numbers began to rise. Returns that were steady, not spectacular, but real. I called him to share the news. His voice was quiet on the phone, but I heard something I hadn't heard in a long time: hope. Word spread. One client turned into two, and two into three. People whispered about the young man who had been overlooked, now quietly managing money with surprising skill. I still wasn't the man in the boardroom or the flashy executive with a corner office, but I was gaining something more important: respect. From others, yes, but mostly from myself. That respect was a fire that warmed the cold nights and brightened the long days. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to build something that couldn't be ignored. And all it took was one client willing to take a chance. I started dressing differently, not because I wanted to impress anyone else, but because I was starting to feel like I belonged somewhere I never thought I would. The thrift store suits and worn shoes slowly gave way to tailored jackets and polished leather. It was more than just clothes. It was armor for the battles I was ready to fight. Every morning I looked in the mirror and saw a man who was hungry, not for revenge, but for respect. For a chance to prove that labels like "not management material" didn't define me. The hunger drove me to work harder, learn faster, and push boundaries. I devoured books on leadership, negotiation, and psychology. I studied the moves of those who had walked the path before me, figuring out what made them successful. But the hunger also kept me humble. I never forgot where I came from: the late nights, the empty wallet, the silence after being told I wasn't good enough. That memory was a fire that kept me moving forward when everything else felt uncertain. Soon, I wasn't just managing small portfolios. I was building relationships, gaining trust, and navigating the complex world of investors who at first looked at me with skepticism. The suits and fancy offices didn't impress them. My knowledge and determination did. There were moments when I felt like I was walking a tightrope. One wrong step and everything could fall apart. But I learned to balance the pressure, to breathe through the fear. And the hunger, it never faded. It grew stronger, not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I was enough. Eventually, the invitations started coming. The meetings, the networking dinners, the kind of events where decisions were made behind closed doors, where power was whispered over clinking glasses. At first, I felt like an outsider staring through a window, someone who had only just learned the language of the room. But I showed up anyway, dressed sharp, voice steady, eyes focused. They didn't know me yet, and honestly, I wasn't sure they wanted to. I could feel their skepticism like a shadow at my back. The same doubt I'd heard years ago echoed in their questions and sideways glances. But I was ready. I listened more than I talked, learning their rhythms, their interests, their fears. I paid attention to the investors who controlled the flow of money, the people who could make or break deals without ever standing in the spotlight. Slowly, I started to speak up. Small comments at first, insights here, questions there. I wasn't trying to impress, I was trying to understand. And then something changed. Those glances of doubt turned into nods. Those skeptical questions became conversations. I was no longer just the quiet guy in the back. I was part of the dialogue. That was the moment I realized. I was no longer just managing money. I was managing their trust, their expectations, their hopes. They had once told me I wasn't management material. Now, I was walking in their world, the very world they had tried to keep me out of. And I was ready to change the rules. The day I stepped into the boardroom for the first time as more than just a background face was unforgettable. The polished table stretched wide, and the eyes of executives and investors were fixed on me. For a moment, I felt the old familiar sting, the doubt, the weight of past judgments creeping back in. But this time, I was ready. I started by sharing the plan I had worked on for weeks, the strategy to grow their investments with steady, calculated moves. I spoke clearly and confidently, weaving numbers with stories that made sense, turning data into a vision they could see and believe in. At first, there were raised eyebrows and skeptical glances. But as I spoke, something shifted. The room grew quieter, the questions sharper but more engaged. I could feel their respect growing, not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. It wasn't just about managing money anymore. It was about leading ideas, guiding decisions, and owning the space I'd been told I'd never enter. By the end of the meeting, the board voted in favor of my plan. It was the first time I'd seen my name on a document that mattered in a room full of powerful people. The moment felt surreal, like I'd climbed a mountain I didn't think I could scale. Walking out of that room, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who had left that office months ago, defeated and invisible. I was someone who had fought, failed, and risen. Someone who had taken the sting of rejection and used it as fuel. That boardroom was more than just a place. It was proof that I could lead, that I was management material all along. After that boardroom victory, things started moving faster than I expected. Word got around, quietly at first, but soon I was known as the guy who understood investors in a way few others did. They called me the Investor Whisperer, a nickname that made me smile privately. It wasn't about the title, though. It was about connection. I realized that managing money was only half the battle. The other half was managing people's fears, hopes, and doubts. Investors weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people with stories, anxieties, and dreams tied to their investments. I listened more than I talked. I learned what mattered to them, their worries about risk, their dreams for security, their hesitation about change. I didn't promise miracles. I promised honesty, clarity, and steady hands. Sometimes that meant delivering bad news with empathy. Sometimes it meant celebrating small wins together. Every conversation was a chance to build trust, and slowly that trust became the foundation of my success. Managing investors wasn't just about business. It was about human connection. And in that, I found my true strength. I wasn't just the guy who'd been told he wasn't management material. I was the one who managed their investors, calm, steady, and trusted. The man they had doubted had become the man they relied on. Looking back now, it's almost surreal to think how far I've come. The same people who once dismissed me, who saw me as someone who couldn't handle management, now come to me for advice, for guidance. The rejection that once felt like a crushing weight became the fire that forged me. It wasn't an easy journey. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when doubt whispered in my ear louder than hope. But every step, every challenge, every failure was a piece of the story I needed to write. A story not about proving others wrong, but about proving myself right. Respect isn't given, it's earned. Not through titles or suits, but through persistence, integrity, and heart. I manage investors now, people who trust me with their futures. And every time I walk into a room, I carry with me the lessons of the past, the pain of being underestimated and the strength that grew from it. I don't just manage money, I manage trust, relationships, and expectations. I manage to turn doubt into opportunity. So when they told me I wasn't management material, I didn't argue. I just worked. And now I manage their investors. And that's the best kind of victory,